operation on a global scale amongst groups and individuals dedicated to implementing solutions to the many challenges we face on the planet at this time.
Welcome to the 11 Days of Global Unity Summit 2023. My name is Jana Larson, and I am coordinator of the Economic Justice Campaign for We the World, as well as filling many other roles for We the World. Today, I am excited that we will be joined by Jonathan Granoff and Rivera's son, who will be talking about disarmament. For the full 11-day summit schedule, you can register for free by going to we.net. Then you can participate in the after panel public discussions and see replays of the recordings. There, you can also make a contribution to support us at We the World by going to we.net. Now let's bring in my guest, Rick Ofick. Rick Ofick is the founder of We the World at we.net and the co-creator of 11 Days of Global Unity. Welcome to the broadcast, Rick Ofick.
Thank you, Jana. And thank you all so much for joining us for this powerful discussion of disarmament at our 11 Days of Global Unity Summit. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Granoff. Jonathan Granoff is president of the Global Security Institute, permanent observer to the UN of the International Anti-Corruption Academy, and representative to the UN of the World Summits of Nobel Peace Laureates. And he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014. Welcome to the broadcast, Jonathan Granoff. And yes, thank you. And Jonathan, you have been working to abolish nuclear weapons for as long as I know you, which is decades. Can you talk about the nature of human security that leads some to be aligned with the weapons of manufacturers and their politicians who benefit financially, and others who are more aligned with nonviolence and the growing culture of connection and unity that more reflects we consciousness and the power and security of being in a society that is based on serving the common good? What are your thoughts about this, Jonathan?
Sure. Well, if we're going to survive as a human species, we have to act as human beings. And human beings have the capacity of using reason, using objective empirical truth, and the capacity of empathy, compassion, love, and working together. If we deny those capacities and rely on brute force and the threat of brute force, and the threat of brute force that is so overwhelming that it would destroy the very future of the human species, I'm talking about the use of less than 2% of the existing nuclear arsenals, then I would venture to say that such conduct is neither rational nor human. Now, the first duty of any state is to protect its citizens. But no state, nor even a group of powerful states, nor even the majority of states, are capable of protecting its citizens without a global regime to address pandemics. The vaccine apartheid world, in places where there isn't cooperation, there isn't health cooperation, viruses will mutate and they will attack the whole. In a world in which 60% of our oxygen comes from the phytoplankton, which depends on the health of the oceans, unless there's a legal regime protecting the oceans that's universal, the health of our third lung will be impaired. It's dependent on the actual alkaline acidic balance of the oceans, which is dependent on the climate, which is dependent on how we move our bodies and heat our homes. So we live in a very integrated world. The other part of our lungs are the rainforests. The rainforests have to be understood as part of the common good for humanity, not as just mere property. Same with water, same with air. So now what's interesting is we have certain paradigms of thought. Property, as in the modern world, comes basically from some very ancient traditions. Not so ancient. We can identify when the concept of modern property began. The concepts we live with mostly in the world come from the Roman Empire. One of the elements of property is the right of destruction. I have a house. I can destroy it. I can rent it. I can improve it. I can sell it, but I can destroy it because it's mine. There's a part in Travels with Charlie where they come across a rainforest, a redwood forest, and the owner is cutting it down, and they ask him, "Why are you doing this?" He said, "Because I own it." But we cannot possibly approach biodiversity, the great richness of other species, as if we own them and have a right to destroy them, or approach the global commons, the climate, the oceans, the rainforests, as if we own them and could destroy them. It's simply not human, not realistic. It's an affront to the gift of the Creator, just as nuclear weapons are. The idea that to protect something that we've created, states, which are supposed to protect us, that we would destroy the very future of humanity. So we're in a predicament now in which we need a paradigm. We're going on the wrong bus. We're going on a bus in which we're at war with nature. We're going on a bus in which we're leading to wars amongst nations. And this begins, of course, it begins in the hearts of people, whether we are guided by fear or whether we're guided by the power of love or the love of power. But the institutions of the state are presently being dominated by the institutionalization of a fear model. Don't tell me your values, show me your budget. What's being put into the budgets for diplomacy? What's put in the budgets for human interchange and cultural interchange? What's so interesting is the business community has gone global, wants to trade everywhere. What's interesting is the financial communities have gone global, the cultural communities, but our definition of security is basically a military model. So human security poses a different model. It says the purpose of the state is to take care of people. That's the first duty. And to address realistically these global issues means putting human security first. But I would say that this is also a personal issue. At the personal level, and because we're talking, we the world community are people of spiritual awakening, to use a motto, love people, use things. Never love things and use people. How can we should be thinking not only do we want to survive, we want to thrive. We don't just want to fly, we want to soar. We want to reach the fullness of our human potential. And that's about moving from love of self to selfless love. And that's about having our countries operate with that kind of generosity. After World War I, we put crushing reparations on the German people. We received the bad karma of Nazism. After World War II, we built up their economies, and we ended up with trading partners and democracies in Germany and Japan. So virtue coming from love works. It is practical and it is realistic. Whereas the pursuit of domination is neither practical nor realistic. We can't dominate nature, we have to live in harmony with it. And we can't in the modern world with weapons of mass destruction, we can't pursue domination of other nations. And when we overstep those boundaries, such as invading other countries, as my country, the United States, did with Iraq, suffering emerges, just as enormous suffering has emerged from Russia invading Ukraine. It's very hazardous. So we have to come back to certain spiritually grounded principles. Love people, use things, and people are part of the very web of life that I talked about. We breathe from a single cell organism in the oceans, phytoplankton. We are dependent upon the great web of life. So to love people is to love the web of life and to use things. Things are things that we create: ideas, nations, religions, ethnic identity, our various identities. Because what is human is something highly mysterious and spiritual: our consciousness, our qualities. So I say, love people, use things. The things we need to use today are to force our nations to find ways of coming to a greater level of understanding and constraining and preventing the fascism that is spreading in the world, that's based on fear and the pursuit of domination. We can neither dominate one another, and we have discovered that whether it's the family or the nation or the community, the application of the moral and ethical admonitions of the wise are effective. The golden rule works. And the rule that says, I'll take for myself and I don't care about you, it doesn't work for personal peace or national peace. So we are a community that says what is good is practical and realistic. And what is not realistic is trying to dominate the natural world and trying to dominate other people. That's not sustainable or realistic, nor is it good. So I am willing to say what is virtuous and good is the most practical route forward. And we, people who believe in the reality of the human family as both practical and realistic, we are the realists. And those who are saying we need to fight over our ethnic and our religious and our national identities, they're not realistic. It's no longer sustainable. So love people, use things. Never love things and use people.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. And I love you.
Oh, Rick, I want to say we are all so happy at the restoration of your health. Many prayers of people that you've never met have been answered, and the prayers of your brothers and sisters like myself, whom you know well, were answered, and we celebrate your recovery and pray that it increasingly grant you stronger and stronger health, because your voice and your service to all of us is ennobling and brings us health on many levels. And I thank God for gifting your restoration for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. Thank you. So let's bring in Rivera Sun. Rivera Sun is the program's coordinator for Campaign Nonviolence and Pace e Bene's other projects. As an author and activist, she has written numerous books and novels, including The Dandelion Insurrection and the award-winning Ari Ara series. She is the editor of Nonviolence News, serves on the advisory board of World Beyond War, and the board of the Backbone Campaign. Welcome to the broadcast, Rivera Sun.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick, and for all the We the World community and the 11 Days of Global Unity.
Thank
This is
you.
a wonderful thing that you've put together.
Thank you. And I was wondering, as we go forward, Rivera, could you please react to anything that Jonathan Granoff said? Tell us about your major nonviolence events that are happening globally, and how the movement for nonviolence can inform the disarmament campaign that We the World and so many other organizations are engaged in. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jonathan spoke very eloquently about the need to be very clear about our values and our humanity right now at this particular juncture of human history. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said famously, it is no longer a question between violence and nonviolence. It's a question between nonviolence and non-existence. Humans have come up with so many ways of existentially ending our species and the majority of life on Earth as we know it. Just one of the many ways would have been enough to cause alarm in all of us and should be enough to get us all in the street doing everything we can to stop these crises. But suffice to say, all of these crises are bringing us to a point where we need to radically rethink what's important to us. How are we going to show up in these times? What are the values upon which we want to stand and put our time, energy, and money behind? And so this is true as individuals, and we're seeing many people doing this kind of life reassessment. We see communities starting to make these shifts, and we do indeed see some of these shifts starting to happen on the national and international level. Things like the oceans that Jonathan mentioned are forcing us to confront that we can no longer think upon the lines of arbitrary borders that we have become accustomed to. And that causes us in turn to rethink matters of security, the way that we organize our worldviews, and fundamentally what we think about the use of force to get our way. And where is security actually anchored? What actually makes us safe and secure? And one of the things I think many people are increasingly starting to come to is actually that mutual security is not found in things like mutually assured destruction, as they say about nuclear weapons, but in building a culture of peace and active nonviolence, and rooting that peace in matters of equality and justice for all, not for some. So the work that I do with Campaign Nonviolence and Pace Bene is Italian for peace and all good. We've been around for about 30 years. We're a small group, about 6 people on our staff, with a tremendous impact. Every year we organize from September 21st to October 2nd, the Campaign Nonviolence Action Days, and we have 4,600 actions and events across the United States and around the world to build a culture of peace and active nonviolence, free from war, poverty, racism, and environmental destruction. Around 60,000 people participate in this every year. And we're just one of the organizations that helps to make this happen. We work collaboratively with many, many groups, and we try to work intersectionally on a number of issues. So some of our work focuses on peace issues and disarmament, which I'll talk a lot about today. But we also recognize that issues like climate and racism and economic justice all intersect with all of the others. So when we call people into action to build this culture of nonviolence, we're looking at the International Day of Peace. We're actually asking people to take the values that we've been talking about public in the streets with marches and rallies. We're asking people to hold racial healing circles or do teach-ins on what nonviolence even means. So one of the things that we ask people to do is to take actions to get our institutions, including banks, including academic institutions like universities and colleges, retirement funds, any financial investment funds that we might be part of, to divest from violence. And that in our framework includes weapons of all kinds, guns, nuclear weapons, and fossil fuels. We ask people to unite these issues and to see these great threats to humanity and the planet, and to ask the networks that we are a part of, indeed demand, that we take the financial resources out of these places and reinvest them in the solutions that we know work and we know we need. So when we talk about nonviolence, we really look at systemic and structural nonviolence as well as direct violence. There are solutions to direct violence. And so some of the things that we're looking at in disarmament include things like ending gun violence and, addressing the tragedy that is racking our communities in the United States, and coming together to find solutions, some of which include actually gun buybacks, turning in guns, and also includes things like basic gun safety and common sense gun laws. We also, work to make sure the culture understands that there are solutions and alternatives to these forms of what people grab for protection and safety. People pick up guns because they feel afraid. We need to meet that underlying fear. And that's a lot about what the culture of nonviolence is about. We just talked about how we need mutual security that's anchored in things like renewable energy and economic justice, so that the things that drive us towards war, we're eliminating before we even get there. And the things that drive us into conflicts on the local level are being addressed as well. We try to look at institutionally and structurally, so working on things like nonviolent schools. And I'll just stop the share for a minute and just share another little story that we worked on with our Nonviolent Cities project, because in addition to doing the action days, we're also always organizing year round. And one of those programs is to help communities launch nonviolent cities projects where they can put in the viable solutions that we know exist. One of these includes a great project in the Twin Cities, where this group of young men were trained by Nonviolent Peace Force and our Twin Cities Nonviolence group to provide nonviolent, unarmed protection at a school in North Minneapolis. So the school had been contemplating hiring armed security guards, armed cops, to provide the protection the school thought it needed. Instead, they trained these young men in unarmed civilian protection, which is being used in hot conflict zones around the world, including in Ukraine, including in Sudan and South Sudan. And so what they do is they patrol the school, they escort the students in and out. If they see any trouble in the streets, they use de-escalation techniques to move the people away from there. We are always looking for those practical, tried and true solutions that ordinary people like us can apply. That way we have alternatives to the things that we've been turning to weapons of all sorts to achieve. And this works on the local level, it works on the international level, but it takes courage and it takes vision and it takes perseverance and it takes organizing, which is a lot of the work that we do with Campaign Nonviolence. We have a lot of different ways that we show up in the world and invite other people to show up as well. We are anchored in the lineage of nonviolence. We understand how many people have boldly gone out on a limb to offer us these solutions. Thousands of people, far more than just Gandhi or Dr. Martin Luther King or Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. We have seen how nonviolent action has literally won rights and freedoms. It has defended nations from invasions and occupations. It has ousted tyrants and dictators. It has achieved equality for the genders. Most of the modern social movements that have achieved anything in the past 100 years have done so using nonviolent action. It is the most profound creation of humanity to date, and it is hard at work transforming our world. And so if we want to disarm, we have viable alternatives, we have solutions, and it's upon us all to learn more about them and see how these tools and programs and practices work. And that's what we do with Campaign Nonviolence. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Rivera, son. And
I dropped a link to a investment initiative that came out of the Religions for Peace conference, suggesting that all funds of institutions that claim any moral legitimacy should at least follow the secular state of Norway's sovereign wealth fund that's over $1 trillion, that prohibits any investing in enterprises that benefit from weapons of indiscriminate effect, landmines, cluster munitions, nuclear weapons, that violate fundamental human rights, like using child labor to make t-shirts, and that despoil the environment, because the funds for it came from the windfall of fossil fuel, but the Norwegian legislature realized that that's not sustainable for the future. So that if they put the funds into a fund for the future, they can only invest it in environmentally responsible practices. Now, if a secular state can do that, certainly we can challenge our churches, our colleges, our unions to follow suit. But presently, what we're finding in universities is they will talk about divestment in climate, but not see the relationship between the violence between people and the relationship between that and the violence of the environment. And nuclear arms are first and foremost, the biggest cost is not money, it's the institutionalization of adversity, and adversity based on threat. I found out in my research, because I was asked to be a participant in the anniversary celebrations of the Geneva talks between Gorbachev and Reagan. I was a participant with the participants. I was asked to be an outside commentator. So I did a deep dive, and I came across a memo from George Shultz to Ronald Reagan, in which they were talking about moving from mutually assured destruction to mutually assured security. So people who are listening should realize that sometimes, in the most unexpected ways, if you push with the water of grace and goodness, you can break a crack in the wall and get through in places where no one would ever have expected. And when I read that, I got goosebumps, because these were the most right-wing people we'd ever had in government, the most militaristic, the most belligerent, and yet, when their humanity came out, they used the skills that they had from business, the skills that they had from politics, to actually bring us a more peaceful world. So I just want to reinforce what Rivera said, that the strongest force in the world comes from the power of love, and that is essentially what ahimsa, or without violence, is about. It rests on the most positive energy, and it's not just nonviolence. That the word means without disturbing the flow of the beneficence of the Creator, without destroying the environment. That's violence. Without destroying your own soul. That's the first place of nonviolence, the inner place. And without, of course, destroying lives through war. But it's really deeper. It's to bring it into our very breathing. Like this breath, am I in harmony? This moment, what are my qualities? What is my nation within myself? Is it a place of nonviolence? Is it a place of generosity? Is it a place harmonious with the soul? Or is it a place that still harbors resentment, jealousy, thinking about when are you going to forgive that person? Are you going to do it just before you die, or a week before you die? What about right now? And so, this movement that Rivera is talking about is not just about the world that we see. It is also about the world within us that you can't see. That's really, really the most important part of us, the part of our souls.
Very nice. Thank you, Jonathan. So with all of us now on, can we have a call to action, like specific ideas about how would each of you like people to take action? So let's start with Jonathan. Go ahead. I know there's a lot people can do, but if you want to prioritize.
Prioritize is first and foremost finding within yourself the most virtuous qualities that you have that bring you the greatest peace, which is the power of love and compassion. So make a decision that you will cultivate those qualities, because think of the other qualities that you have: jealousy, doubt, anger, hastiness. If whichever dog you have in the backyard that you feed is the one that's going to thrive. That's the way it works. So you can't like get rid of those qualities by fighting with them. You have to emphasize the more positive qualities. So what are the actions that arise from those qualities? The actions that arise from that move you from the head to the heart, move to the hand. So what are the actions that one can take? Well, that depends on what skills you have. And if you make that intention, the opportunity to act in your personal life will present itself. That's just how the universe is arranged. But there are clearly policies that are before us right now. So we have to really work forcefully against any of the political leaders that will divest people of moral agency. And the way you divest people of moral agency or their humanity is by lying to them. The way you divest people of moral agency is claiming that you and you alone, or your party and your party alone, can solve problems. The way in which people are divested of their personal agency and humanity in democracies is by playing to fear and demagoguery. So we have to actively understand that where that road leads is to the death and destruction of freedom. And the United States is a country that makes mistakes. That's what nations do. But because we have fundamental freedoms, we have the capacity to speak out and make corrections. There's no moral equivalency, for example, with Russia, in which they because it's an authoritarian regime, it's impossible to make corrections because they don't have fundamental freedoms to critique the state. So right now we have people in our community saying, basically arguing that there's a moral equivalency between the United States and Russia, that we violated international law when we invaded Iraq. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. That we were foolish in causing Russia to be afraid by expanding NATO. Yes, we did. But we can make those corrections because we have freedom of speech still, and we have to exercise that in corrections. But there's no moral equivalency when there's an authoritarian, tyrannical regime in which it cannot make corrections. And that is what the Russian Empire quest is about. That's what the Chinese quest is about. That's what the Saudi Arabian quest, the Turkish and the Iranian quest, these aspiring empires. They are about regimes in which a handful of men make all the decisions for all the women and all the other men. That's what those regimes are about. And that is violence intrinsically because it denies the moral expression of the people. We have it, and it is precious. We have to protect it. That's number one. Number two, weapons of mass destruction. There's no good hands for these bad arms. They're intrinsically immoral. They can't be used to defend anybody. To use a nuclear weapon is to destroy the very fabric of the future, and to destroy literally less than 2% of the existing arsenal, if it were used, would throw enough soot into the stratosphere to destroy the human civilization as we know it. End of story. So these are weapons that can't be used. So the walking down the ladder that the diplomats have laid out, test ban treaty, fissile material cutoff treaty, strengthening international safeguards, lowering the political currency of these weapons of fear and destruction, that institutionalized adversity, that is a demand we have to make. But more importantly, don't tell me your values, show me your budget. How much money are we spending on the military pursuit of security, and how much are we spending on diplomacy, law, cultural cooperation? Those are the things that prevailed in ending the Cold War, is building avenues of trust. That works, whereas fear and intimidation don't. So we need to have people not ever believing that their voice, that their moral agency is irrelevant, and to bring into practice principles that express their love, and not be ashamed of it, and not doubt your conscience, So I also ask people to come up with creative solutions in their communities and engage at a local level, because that's where you learn the skills that can be applied at a larger level. I would not be an effective international advocate if I hadn't spent decades practicing law in Philadelphia and dealing at local levels with local people's real problems. That's where you develop your skills. You develop your skills as a person in your home, with your spouse, with your family, with your community, and then you can effectively, like Rivera is doing, take on larger issues. And you never know, we never know, because, well, no, forget about knowing. There is no quantitative measurement for virtue. There's no, let me reiterate that. Giving a glass of water with real love might be more important than your voting. You don't know, there's no way of measuring purity and virtue. So you have to act with the highest level of skill and qualities that you have, and leave the outcome to the future, to providence. We never know what's going to happen, but we do know how we act in the moment. So it's about personal empowerment, the affirmation of the truth that we are one human family, that we live in one house, and policies. Okay, let me just give a criteria. Jesus said, I was hungry, did you feed me? I was naked, did you clothe me? What you do to the least amongst you, you do to me. There you go. Gandhi said, if you want to evaluate a policy, imagine the most poorest disenfranchised person and think, does this policy burden that person or benefit them? And there is your criteria. And engage in the policies that benefit that disenfranchised poor person, that benefit those who were in prison, those who were ill, those who were poor. And then you'll know where to go.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Rivera, would you like to react to anything that Jonathan said? And what is your call to action?
She's doing what I think.
Her whole life is
she's a role model.
A call to action, right?
The quote, Gandhi, my life is my message. Yes.
There you go.
All of our lives are our message. So I think being a little reflective about what message are we saying with those lives. And on that note, being outspoken about the need to disarm our hearts, disarm our communities, disarm at the local level, disarm at the national level. I think you shouldn't underestimate the importance of actually saying the words, because that is how we create the envelope in which change can occur, where cultures do shift, where people think this crazy idea might just be possible. But to make it feel like not a crazy idea, one of the things we can all do is to start to get to know the alternatives, these viable solutions we've been talking about. You know, Jonathan spoke about the difference between a place like the US and a place like Russia or Turkey. And the good news about nonviolent action is that this stuff works in the worst conditions. We have seen people like ourselves in countries who have no rights and no freedoms use strikes, boycotts, shutdowns, occupations, mass protests, stay home sicks, blockades, and some of the 300 other methods of nonviolent action to oust some of the worst dictators this world has ever seen. Chile, the Philippines, Sudan just had one 2 years ago. You know, we have seen this over and over again. And this is just one branch of the field of nonviolent struggle. I could go on and on. We don't have time for it today. But when you know the realistic alternatives, you start to understand how someone like me can get up here and say disarmament is possible. We have the solutions for handling conflict. Conflict is inevitable. We're human. It's going to happen. The violence part, the war part, the military part, that's all optional. That's just how we decided to deal with the conflicts that we have. Now, we could have said anytime a conflict comes up between nations, those two leaders are going to sit in a room until they work out a solution that works for both of them. We're going to put billions and trillions of dollars into getting that to happen. Right? We were going to train our school children. We're going to make Hollywood movies about how this happens. We can have cultures of nonviolence, cultures of peace that set this kind of thing up as an expectation, not an exception to the norm. So I think the third thing people can do is always connect the dots between what's happening in your home and in your local community and what's happening on the international level. If we want to see global peace, we need to start fostering that culture of peace as an expectation right where we are. And that is something that's so tangible we all can do. So on the last tangible note, if you don't want to go alone with this, you're in part of this wonderful We the World community, and there are networks and groups like Campaign Nonviolence that have collaborated with We the World over the years because we see how we interconnect. And I just invite you all to also join our email list and hear about the campaigns that we're working on, join in. As the great Brazilian popular educator said, pray with your feet. This is a crucial time in human history. The next 10 years are literally make or break for our species. It is the best time to be alive because what we do right now matters forever, for the future of all humans yet to come. And I'm excited to be here. It is a great time to be alive. And I'm glad that you are here with me. It makes for good company on this immense journey that we're on.
I agree with that. Thank you so much. And Jenna, do you want to add a call to action to the list, and then we'll bring it to the end?
Okay, well, as a mere mortal among my cohorts here, it starts with one. So let us show up. Let us radically soar and shift our actions and ways of being to our mutual, nonviolent security and justice for all.
And your presence is as important to the future of humanity as everybody on this panel and the others that we love and know.
I wanted to reinforce something that Rivera said.
Yeah.
Recently, I was very actively engaged in International Prayer Day around Hiroshima. And we had an event at St. Bart's Church here in New York. And Peter Yarrow showed up from Peter, Paul, and Mary. And after, I mean, there was Michael Fitzpatrick played cello, Bill Swing, people gave fantastic presentations. It was very, very uplifting. And when it was over, people were just silently there. So Peter Yarrow was in the audience, and he came up and he gathered everybody together and he had us sing Blowin' in the Wind. Now, so you can find it at the at Global Security Institute's website, gsinstitute.org, or Voices for a World Free of Nuclear Weapons in the United Religions Initiative. And there's a video of this. Or Audrey Kitagawa's website, I forgot the website name, goodness. But in any case, Voices for a Nuclear Free World has it there. So he had everybody sing together, Blowing in the Wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind, okay? It's mysterious, but you know what it is. And it was pure kumbaya. It was uncynical, unapologetic, unrestrained. We are together, we love each other, and we are working for peace. And it was exactly what Rivera said. And it was so wonderful. If you watch it, you'll see. It was so wonderful because people are poisoned by cynicism and doubt. That's a way of moving yourself away from the center of your power of love and power of peace. And it was so refreshing. And he's in his 90s, and he had the courage to say, let's just do this, and it was so unexpected. And so it was such a powerful lesson for me, because I see in my sons, I have 3 sons, and because they are so sophisticated from going to great colleges, it's hard for them to just kumbaya. But what's the matter with tree hugging? What's so difficult about peace, love, and understanding? And when they get the space and join in, they love it. So, so I just wanted to, like, amplify Rivera's call to speak out for what is good, what is true, what is virtuous, and don't hesitate.
There you go. I agree. So for me, this has been a truly inspiring discussion. Thank you for being part of the 11 Days of Global Unity Summit. And it's all about we, right? So let's go from being a me society to a we society. That's why we launched we.net. So together we can create a world that works for all. And Jana?
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Jonathan and Rivera. And thank you all for watching this and for being a part of the 11 Days of Global Unity. Go to we.net to get involved. And don't forget to stick around for the public discussion right after this panel. Much love to you all. Goodbye.